Hi, everybody. Time for different perspectives. We are going to be chatting today about emotions. So, welcome to the Different Perspectives with Leanne Holitza and Mason Holitza. We're here to discuss our differing viewpoints through the lens of our energy work. As I said, today we're going to be discussing emotions and how we use them to manifest. Myself, Leanne, has a background working in business before I found my true path and transitioned into energy work. I'm currently the owner of the Healing Studio in Broomfield, Colorado, where I work as a healer and teacher. You can find more about me at insightfulinspirations.com. Mason, my son, has the unique opportunity to be raised in a subtle energy-aware household where more than meets the eye is not only validated, but encouraged to explore. He is currently a student journalist at CSU. You can find his work on the Rocky Mountain Collegiate. So, hi, everybody. For those of you who have been listening and sharing with us the time together, either live or after the fact, we're grateful for you and encourage you guys to give us any comments or questions that you have. We will get to what we can. How you doing, Mason?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. How's your emotions?
All over the place for the last 18 months.
Ooh, yeah. So since the pandemic started?
Or I guess that's only 11 months, but
well, it probably did start sooner rather than later. So tell me what the all over the place is. Give me some ranges.
I think that there's a lot of these different things that people can't really explain because they're so abnormal that they've been experiencing the past year. Because I've talked to a lot of I don't know about everyone else, but I know I've talked to a lot of people in my circle, and they're just very overwhelmed about small things. And after being inside for long periods of time, their emotional bar is way lower. It doesn't hold as much, if that makes sense.
So they're having a harder time coping? Is that what you mean?
I think that there's just this overall apathy that's kind of come about since the pandemic started, where people just don't care less about, will care less about filling their day with activities.
Okay, so apathetic energy.
Yeah, I think everyone got very complacent in this place where they're just like, oh, I didn't have to do anything. That's kind of nice.
It's kind of nice for a little while.
Yeah. And I think that can kind of upset a lot of things and I think that there's also this big group of people that are just so antsy to get back to doing something every day.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about emotions in regards to energy work. And I mean, you can feel emotions when you walk into a room. And I almost feel like just kind of like how the skies got clear because we weren't driving and the smog kind of cleared up. I almost feel like that's what's happened with the emotions too, is a little bit of a reset. There's not just all this busy swirling stuff. And now we have to be with our own emotions and our own selves.
Well, I think a lot of people collapsed under that. A lot of people that might have been a boost for them, but I think a lot of people are over here oh, I have to sit at home and deal with my emotions now. Because I think a lot of people just stuff it into their daily routine because they're so busy that they don't deal with their emotions, then everything just comes crashing in.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think a lot of emotions came up that were unaddressed, and then a lot of emotions came up that were brought on by this. I think it's just a swirl. But I mean, so emotionally speaking, back in the fall of last year, you were kind of all over the place for sure.
Yeah, and I think that was a big part of that was just coming out of this hibernation almost of being present in my responsibilities.
Well, so how did you get with your emotions? I mean, well, for one thing, do you let yourself have the range?
Maybe tell me more.
Well, I mean, a lot of times people will come into my office, for example, and they'll all of a sudden be like, I don't know why I'm crying so much about this particular issue, but it's because there's energy stuck and it's trying to release through the emotional pathways.
I think that even if I don't express it, I will process it, if that makes sense.
I kind of disagree with that.
Yeah, maybe it's more of I process it logically, but not emotionally.
Right. And so that emotions are important in energy work and energy movement.
Yeah, well, I think emotions are important everywhere. And I think they're actually stuffed in a lot of places. Like people are not encouraged to express their emotions most places. And then you go into like, I would almost compare it to a therapy session in terms of how much you're going to get pulled at, if that makes sense. Because the therapist's job is to try and pull your emotions out of you with questions. And I think you just do that inherently. That's just built into your work. And I
Yeah.
think that's true with a lot of things. And that's why you might get the person just breaking down in front of you for no reason that's apparent to them.
Hmm. Yeah. But so back to your statement about emotions and logic and dealing with it logically instead of emotionally. I mean, you had a pretty big thing happen recently that was pretty traumatic. And
Yeah.
I think your girlfriend and you dealt with it differently
Yeah.
because you experienced it together
Yep.
and so your emotional response to it was what?
I just witnessed something that happens every day, and it's a terrible thing that I had to be present for. But I know that it's something that happens more often than anything.
You think that happens a lot?
I think traffic accidents result in deaths a lot more than anything else.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, but watching somebody get hit by a car is not
Yeah.
that normal.
No, and I wasn't saying that it was normal. I was just saying I was witnessing a statistic. I was witnessing one of those people that you see. There were 32,000 people killed by this type of car this year. And I was like, I'm just witnessing this. And I think I was actively processing what I was seeing and not just like sitting back in shock.
Well, and so what about your girlfriend?
I think she had a very emotional reaction. She was like, um, she was in this realm of, oh, this guy has a family, he had aspirations, and it's very sad that that he won't be able to fulfill any of these things. And then I think that she made it a lot worse. I didn't really go into this realm where I had to find out a lot more about the person because I felt like for her, it might have felt like it was good, but for me, it just would have made it more like for me to deal with, if that makes sense.
So you're avoiding your emotions.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And she was using it to go further into her own emotions and process.
Yes.
So so it doesn't sound like so it sounds like you're restricting your emotions is what I guess I'm bringing up.
I never felt like I was restricting my emotions. I just felt like I was restricting information that would make myself upset.
Okay. Avoidance of your emotions.
Yeah, that might be a better word. Just kind of dodging it.
Because if you had to see that person as a real person with a real family and life, then it would be harder.
And I think that it's kind of like, just like, I don't know, hitting it while it's down. It'd just make it worse for me. There's nothing that it's going to take away from me. It's not going to add anything for me. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't have done anything. I'm just saying, as far as like discussing using emotions and flowing with them. I mean, that is one of the messages of energy work is negative emotions are information and positive emotions are information, and the whole range is important to express. And if you have time to be present with a negative emotion, that's just as critical as having time to be present with a happy emotion because it's appropriate, as long as it's appropriate. Right? Because then if you don't deal with it, it goes into your system and it sticks there. And then when you try to deal with it, you can't because you don't have an appropriate way of getting it out.
Yeah, and I think that the way that my way of dealing with it was very, like you said, it was very different from hers because I didn't feel like I was stuffing so much as I was, I think you're right, like avoiding. Because like I had a whole therapy session about it and I processed through it, but I just think that there's this Melissa has a good question.
Yeah, well, I finish your thought.
Well, I just think that she like you said, she was very much in this realm of look at how sad this is, look at everything about this person. And I was like, look at what happened to this person.
So she was kind of marinating in it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, which I didn't find helpful.
Okay. Okay.
I'm gonna
So,
grab a charger. Oh, it'll be 2 seconds.
all right. So Melissa's question is, why does expressing emotions leave one exhausted? What do you think?
I think it's a physical action that you're doing because you have to think to move your body. It probably takes more to process emotions than it does to move a muscle.
Well, but energetically speaking, I'm assuming, Melissa, you're saying it's exhausting to express negative emotions, because joyful emotions typically energetically feed you and fill you up and make, and actually, I mean, yeah,
But
you can have, I mean, I guess you could get fatigued from like being super excited for something.
well, I do think that there's a lot of people that have a social battery that and expressing a lot of positive emotions for an hour and a half might be a little harder.
Yeah. Well, maybe if it's not natural to be expressing those positive emotions, maybe if you're forcing yourself to look happier than you maybe are, that could be exhausting. I don't know. I mean, I feel like when you're processing harder emotions where you're like crying or angry or whatever, and then you're tired after that, I feel like that's because you're detoxing. You're discharging energy that's not good for you anymore, and you're cleansing it and clearing it. And afterwards, you almost need to come offline a little bit to recalibrate and integrate what just happened.
Yeah. Well, I think that you can kind of see how you have to process stuff. Whenever I would go, we talked about this last week. Whenever I'd go get to Gail, I would fall fast asleep, and I would chalk that up to I would get super tired during it because my body was trying to work on itself,
Yeah.
and that's what
Yeah.
I think happens there too. Is you're
Yeah.
like, all right, we got a lot of things to fix now. We just had a very traumatic cleansing session.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, if you think so, emotions are, you know, also kind of sometimes difficult to handle with each other. So maybe with your own emotions in regards to that accident that you witnessed, and then having to deal with your girlfriend's emotions at the same time, maybe it was too much.
Or maybe I took too much of a on it was somebody called it something. It's like bystander perspective or onlooker or something, but it's where you just kind of take a step back and you look at everything as a non-involved person.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, did you have space? Did you have space to
Yeah.
hold
Well,
for your
actually,
girlfriend and
I
her
think
emotions?
I think that's what brought me out of it a little bit is just being like worried about what she was going through. So I was less worried about what I was experiencing. Because when I saw her run up to the person on the ground, my first instinct was to be like, let's just call 911. You don't really want to see that. That's a super traumatic thing for you to see.
Mm-hmm.
And my first instinct would be to pull her back.
Right, and her instinct was to help
Yeah.
and see if she could do
Yeah.
something.
And I think that I was also satisfied in the fact that I knew that I couldn't do anything.
And you knew just because of the situation, the way you assessed it.
Yeah. I knew that I did the only thing that I could.
Okay.
And I don't know. I processed it a lot, and that was definitely one of the most exhausting weeks.
So you felt exhaustion like
Yeah.
Melissa was expressing.
Yep. Exactly. I was just after every time I'd have to like relive it and process it, I would feel exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I do think that sometimes people come into to get an energy healing session, and they do feel like it was a lot of work because there's a lot of stuff that was expressed or done. And sometimes people even kind of try to avoid their emotions in an energy healing session by kind of laughing or making light over it, or being like, oh, you always get me. I don't know how you always get me, and trying to almost like deflect a little bit that processing. And when you don't use your emotions appropriately, manifestation fields get blocked.
Yeah. Well, it's that vulnerability aspect of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that exposing that part of yourself that you don't want anybody else to see once you aren't all nicely tucked together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but being vulnerable to the universe and being vulnerable is important part of manifestation.
Yeah. And well, I'm saying I think that that's a lot of the reason that people might have all this bottled up is because they're uncomfortable with being vulnerable.
Well, so if you think about your using positive emotions for manifestation, what kinds of things do you do to get inspired?
I'll go and watch someone tear apart, like a comedian tear apart a politician.
And that elevates your energy?
Definitely.
How so?
I don't know, just having seeing a person in power taken down from their high horse is a very satisfying feeling, and it motivates me to follow up more and expose them more.
Oh, okay. I don't know. That seems a little extreme as far as like having to tear somebody else down in order to build yourself up.
It's usually they deserve it. Usually they're not losing anything from that article. It's other people who are losing things because of them just acting like nothing's wrong.
So you like the truth to be exposed. That inspires you, is what you're saying.
I don't know. There's some kind of feeling that comes through when when somebody was trying to withhold the truth and it gets exposed anyways.
Okay. So that inspires you. Truth.
I don't know what emotion that would be called, but
So Crystal sharing with us acceptance of what the soul has planned. Super hard to witness and hold space for. Had to do that today. Not really sure how I feel about it. Going back and forth between sadness and acceptance. Yeah, well, and holding space is, I mean, the definition really of holding space means you are not adding any of your own crap into the mix, right? So when you're actually holding space and witnessing, you just are out of it, and you have to kind of almost deal with yourself a little bit later, and so holding space can be exhausting too. And then after you come back to how you feel about it and your own emotions, you might have this different process than you would have if you were in the middle of holding space. So it sounds like maybe too, you had to hold space for like your girlfriend's emotions, back to our previous example.
Yeah. And I think that made me take a back seat, and it made me not really witness what was happening for what was happening in my own head. I witnessed it through her eyes almost.
Yeah. Well, and then later you have your own emotions about that too, is basically what Crystal's bringing up. Like at some point,
yeah.
even, having to witness somebody else doing something, going through something, or having an experience of some sort, then you are still, having a sense, you have your own feelings about it after the fact.
Yeah. And I think that also you can never prepare for it in advance. So you're not going to just have this game plan ready where you're just like, okay, I'm experiencing a traumatic event now. Here's what I have to do. Right.
Well, but I think it's important to know that emotions do best when they flow.
Yeah.
So Melissa's suggesting, does music inspire you? I know for me, music inspires me. And the way different moods I have, there's different music I want to listen to. The emotional state sometimes chooses the music for me.
Yeah, that's definitely true for me. But I don't think that music inspires me to do something productive. It doesn't inspire me in productive ways. It inspires me in what most people would call unproductive ways.
Like what?
It sends me off into thought tangents.
Tangents?
About existential realities and a lot.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like, I'm sure that everyone has experienced it at some point, but just like going down that rabbit hole of going, if the universe didn't exist, what would exist?
But how does music cause you to do that?
I don't know. That's a good question. They're just
listening to lyrics, or are you?
Typically, no.
You're listening to trance, like trance music? Is that what it is?
It's mostly just vibrations, yeah. And I don't know what it is about it, my sensory stuff, that it pleases, but it's anything very deep or very electronic, sounds like something that came from deep in space, I love.
And that creates a space for you to
Think
check out and
abstractly.
explore the other realms of your consciousness, huh?
Yeah.
So sometimes things like toxic masculinity get brought up. And in regards to emotions, to me, that's like not letting yourself express your emotions, being tougher than you maybe are, not allowing yourself to cry or be seen upset. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I think that would be, there's two different sides to the masculinity thing. I think that um, there's the primitive traits, and then there's the societal traits. And I think the societal traits is what everyone doesn't like, right?
In regards to emotion,
Yeah, and I think that everyone has those. Those aren't naturally in you. I think that everyone gets those from being a part of a group of guys.
like
And
what? Like, give me an example.
like I think that most high schoolers will have this experience where they're in like a group of guys and all of them will start making like chanting or something, and then you just feel this deep-seated thing to join in.
Well, that sounds very tribal.
Yeah, and I think that it does make you feel like, oh, I'm part of this group. I have to act manly to continue being a part of this group. And I think that
Well,
that's societal. I don't think that that's inherent.
okay. So you were chanting when you didn't want to chant?
No, I think that I was chanting because I believed I should.
Okay. Interesting. Um, so what about what toxic, well, and you could do toxic feminine emotions too, but what emotions do you think are not naturally flowing with regards to energy?
I think any kind of judgment towards other people is not naturally free flowing energy. I think it's insecurities coming out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean also just saying like I mean, I think it's natural for us to judge each other in the sense of like, is that for me or is that not for me? But taking it too far of saying, if it's not for me, it shouldn't be for you either. That's where I think it kind of crosses the line.
Yeah, and I think that there's also a lot of people that are like, I think that everybody should think the way that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I do think that there's different regions that have different relationships with emotions. Like I think different cultures have different relationships with emotions. And so, I mean, as far as that goes, there's some places where, it's really repressed or it's really not valued. And then there's other places where it's super valued. Where do you land?
Um, like in terms of being expressive or not. Is that what you're
Or
asking?
feeling the value of emotion.
I think I really feel the value. I do feel the value of emotion, but I think that the value of negative emotion is very much judged
Well,
from.
what do you think the value of a negative emotion is?
Well, I think that well, it just helps us release, like you were talking about. It helps us detoxify and
Well,
decompress.
and I think it's also an indication that you're not in alignment with your higher truth. And that's good. I mean, and you don't want to yell at your gas gauge for telling you you're almost out of gas. It's information. Then
Yeah,
you can go get gas unless you drive a Tesla.
but I think that, but I think that even if, because I think my friend group is super like, express whatever you want. If you want to cry in front of us, we don't care. But I think there's still nobody wants to do it.
Mm,
Nobody would do it if they were feeling like it because there's still that societal pressure.
not
And
to
I think
cry.
that just or not to express negative emotions.
And that you think that's masculine and feminine pressure.
Yeah. Um, well, and I think that some people might be kind of not getting the true source of where it might be coming from. Like, somebody might think that they're not supposed to be angry, and that's because I have seen a post actually that said this, that was like men are telling women that they shouldn't be allowed to express this negative emotion, and it's a societal thing that they feel pressured. And I think it goes the other way actually. I think that there's a huge amount of pressure, like you were talking about, that masculinity. There's this huge pressure on men not to cry or express negative emotions.
Right. Where does that come from?
Um, I think it comes from feeling uncomfortable with other people being upset.
Okay. Well, so, I mean, thinking about your upbringing and
Yeah.
energy and all that, you were never really that emotional as a little kid. Your brother has always been very emotional. Um, you got more emotional during kind of puberty and then some high stress times in your early adult times now. Um, but I mean, do you feel like you have to suppress your emotions?
No, I don't feel like I have to. I feel like sometimes I might choose to. Not intentionally, though.
Okay.
I don't feel this pressure to. I just feel this inclination not to create that uncomfortable situation, I think.
So, what do you think the remedy is here for this suppression of emotion?
I don't know. You tell me. I'm looking for it.
Well, I mean, because if I'm literally saying it's okay for you to have feelings, and it's okay for me to have feelings, um,
I think it's just that shock of showing somebody because because you always want to be in this happy emotional state, and then just dropping into this really sad one is not a transition that many people want to instigate.
hmm.
I think people don't want to.
Transition if it's healthy. I mean, if you're
Well,
laughing and smiling in a sad situation,
yeah, and I think people find it difficult to bring it up, including me. Like I think it's difficult to transition to a situation where you're being vulnerable and emotional.
yeah. I mean, I guess I just wish we could hold more space for this because I really do think it's energetically important to have these emotions in order to manifest.
And I almost wish our brains wouldn't react so negatively to it.
Yeah, but I think it's conditioned because little kids don't, they have whatever emotion they feel like having, and they don't think through it and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be expressing this. I think
Yeah.
you get conditioned. And I just don't know how to, I mean, I have to say, your brother, when he gets super emotional, I mean, sometimes it's uncomfortable.
But I feel like he expresses anger as sadness a lot of times.
Yeah, that's his
I feel like
easier
I
emotion.
feel like that's the norm.
That's the easier emotion for him to access. Yeah.
I think that's the way it is for a lot of people. Anger is easier than sadness.
Yeah. Yeah. So Melissa's talking about how your face contorts when in the grip of sadness rising that makes me feel uncomfortable to express when I'm in the company of others. The ugly crier, right? But actually it gives room for everyone else to have their feelings as well, everyone else to have their emotions.
Yeah, and I think that it's like I said, there's just such a hard time getting through that for initial uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I think expressing emotions can be very healing for all of the people in the room, if you do it freely and honestly, and you're doing it with, the truth.
And I think that the permission aspect is really hard for somebody to convince themselves of. Like
Right.
just because somebody said, no, it's okay, you can cry, it doesn't give someone permission.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but also, having the space to not just permission, but to take responsibility and be allowed to have them and not have everybody try to fix you.
yeah.
Like if you're having a sad emotion, everybody be like, oh my gosh, what can I do? How can I change this? Right. And that makes you feel too like you can't express because then everybody's going to want to fix you. And then you don't want to be fixed necessarily, or you want to be able to,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've done it again. We've run out of time. What shall we talk about next?
We could continue this conversation in a different part of it.
Okay. Emotions in regards to.
We could combine a few. We could say emotions in regards to masking.
Okay. Okay. Emotions in regards to masking, because we've talked about masking and, and we can talk more about that. And as far as understanding that real quick too, I mean, I think we could talk about how the dissonance between someone who is expressing a true emotion and somebody who's not.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one.
Like being in the presence of someone who's not offering true emotion and expression.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And we look forward to chatting with you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.